that brings together the community leaders from all levels of government with members of the business community. And the one thing that we all have in common is the vested interest in the continued growth and prosperity of the Blue Water region. For the second consecutive year, we'll conduct a Capitol Talk Legislators panel focused on how state policy and tax reform may affect local businesses, governments, and schools. We welcome our state representatives here today participating in the Legislators panel. And I'd like to take this moment to introduce them to everyone. We have at table number 1, we have Senator Phil Pavlov, representing the 81st District, we have Dan Lauwers. And Representative Paul Muxlow is here for the 83rd District. And the 32nd District Representative Andrea LaFontaine. We also have dozens of local elected and public officials in the audience today, and I'd like to take a moment to express our gratitude and appreciation for your dedication to public service. If you are a public official, could you please stand up so we can take just a minute to recognize you? Come on, don't be shy. My name is Rhonda Badyinski. I am the Public Affairs Committee Chairwoman and a Board Officer of the Blue Water Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a corporate human resource professional for Doughty Paper Company, and I'm currently working in our corporate office, so I'm no longer working in the mill here locally. The Port Huron Mill was originally known as Port Huron Sulfite, and over the years, it's had several names. It's been Port Huron Paper, EB, and finally Downtar. And we will celebrate 125 years of business this year. We are one of the longest and largest living businesses in St. Clair County. All of the topics that we're going to talk about today that's covered in the program are significant to the sustainability of all companies like the Port Huron Mill. Education, business taxes, personal property taxes, minimum wage, right to work, health care, energy, and roads are all important factors in the businesses in our county's ability to be competitive, provide jobs, and be a strong corporate citizen in our community. I would like to give special thanks to another great corporate citizen in business that has been part of our community for more than a century. Today's presenting sponsor, AT&T. AT&T has invested billions into Michigan in the past several years. They are continuing to build critical wireless networks with blazing fast 4G speed. I always wanted to say that. And actually know what it meant. Additionally, we have many supporting sponsors this year that have made this event the premier signature event of the Chamber's Advocacy Program. They are BMJ Engineers and Surveyors, Fifth Third Bank, Domtar, DTE Energy, St. Joseph Mercy Port Huron, Semco Energy and Gas Company, and Port Huron Hospital. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you turn to page 14 in your Chamber Business Guide, you'll notice most of these businesses are listed as St. Clair County's top employers, proudly providing jobs to thousands locally. I would also like to acknowledge our committed volunteers in the Chamber Public Affairs Committee, our advocacy arm for coordinating this presentation. Our committee meets monthly and speaks to issues from a federal, state, and local level that impacts our business community. We review legislation, we conduct candidate forums, We also do capital talk roundtables and with our elected state officials. And we work closely with the Michigan State Chamber of Commerce and other statewide chamber partners to collectively represent the interests of our business membership. So if I could have the committee stand for just 1 minute. You guys worked hard to put this together today, and we want to thank you with a round of applause. Where are you? The members of the Public Affairs Committee are Rory Doughty of AT&T, Rob Patterson, Midwest Appraisal, Timothy Lozen of Lozen, Kolar & Lozen, Vince Hilton from New York Life, Stephanie Helton from St. Joseph Mercy Port Run, Ryan Priest from DTE Energy, Rick Dion, Earl Smith Distributing, Mike Kelly from Frome, Kelly, Butler, and Ryan, and Sharon Wilton with the American Cancer Society. Thank you so much for your help. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jeff Bohm, Chairperson for the St. Clair County Board of Commissioners. The St. Clair County Board of Commissioners is committed to improving the lives of county residents while preparing county government to meet the demands of the future. Please join me in welcoming the leader representing the St. Clair County Board of Commissioners and District 5, Jeff Bohm.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today, and I'd like to thank the sponsors. When I knew I was going to talk today, there's really been 3 themes that have been flying around my head for the past week, and it really comes down to relationship, trust, and communication. First of all, my county board here, the geriatric table. Just kidding, guys. Bill Greatop, Carl Tomian, Don Riley, Dave Rushing. They've been fantastic to work with. We've got a great county board. I can tell you, as being a leader, it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier when you got guys like this to work with. So, thank you. Also, the county, we've got a lot of county department heads here. We have a lot of elected officials in the room. County board's kind of unique in the fact that we set the county budget, but we also have partners in this. What I mean by partners is our elected officials are responsible for 73% of the money spent in the county. Ultimately fall under the control of the other elected officials. We have control over roughly 27%. So you need that trust and you need those good working relationships. And I can't emphasize enough how great these guys have been to work with. Also, local, state, federal. We've got a lot of our state legislators, Don Brown representing Candace. We have quarterly workshops. Every, 4 times a year we get together and we talk about the different issues that the counties face. And we work together and we really have a great working relationship with them. Important surrounding communities. I've got Ron Trombley here. Ron, I want you to stand up because I'm going to pick on you today. Ron Trombley is actually from Lennox Township, and you say, why would that be so important? Ron Trombley has the largest landfill in the state of Michigan. Okay? St. Clair County also owns a landfill. You guys are about 10 times larger than we are. Ron gets the opportunity to see probably the first things that come out in landfill technologies, all the above. Ron calls Jeff and takes me to different meetings. We just went to Canada last week to look at some stuff. So when those relationships, you have those relationships and those trusts, it's huge. I can't speak volumes. So Ron, thank you for your help. Then I'd like probably the last thing I'm going to talk about, we started this roughly 3 years ago. If you remember the Bridge Mitigation Plaza, and a group formed out of that called Blue Meets Green. If you've been part of Blue Meets Green, please, I want you to stand up in this room right now. People that attend the meetings, that have been to the meetings, I know you guys are out there. I see you, Sherry and Paul, and I don't want to start calling you guys out now. Please stand up. The importance of this is we meet on a regular basis to talk about the issues that face us as a county, but probably even more so important on that communication. Early on in the process, if you've ever been through one of Randy Meyer's clicker deal there, the first thing that we identified as a weakness was the communication piece of it, okay? Hence, a year later, we did that same survey to everybody and we asked them what was the strong suit of that group, and communication was the number one thing that came back that was the strong piece of that. Very important to have that if we're going to continue to pull ourselves forward. And with that, all these things sound great, but if you don't have a top-notch administrator to pull it all together, it's not going to happen. and I'm going to say this every time I get up here, if I never do anything else right in politics, I hired this guy, Bill Kauffman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's nice to see that the crowd gets bigger and bigger every year and not driving people away. So, but maybe you're here to see our legislators. So, I certainly want to thank the Chamber for sponsoring this event. I look forward to meeting with you every year, letting you know what's going on, telling you a little bit about some of the great things that county departments and elected officials are up to. I want to welcome all of you who took the time today out of your busy schedule to spend with us to talk a little bit about federal government, state government, and county government as well. There's a lot happening with the county right now, and unfortunately I don't have a lot of time to spend talking with you. So I'll really hit just what I think are the high points and touch on what I believe you are probably going to be most interested in. Being the State of the County address, I've got to talk to you about finances and how we're doing. After all, you're all business people, you're residents of the county, and you deserve to know how your tax dollars are being used. And besides, the Board of Commissioners told me I have to talk about this every year. So, we'll also measure the community's progress in the past 12 months. We'll look at current county programs and projects that you and the business community can benefit directly from. I'll fill you in a little bit on what's going on with the convention center. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about how changes in Washington and Lansing are impacting the county. One thing I'd like you to remember as we start talking about revenues, with the county, more than 50% of our total revenue is made up of taxes that are collected on property taxes. And while all of us have been enjoying paying lower taxes over the last couple of years, we probably don't appreciate the fact that the value of our property and our businesses continue to decline as well. And unfortunately, our equalization director doesn't feel we've hit rock bottom yet. We do think that might occur probably in 2014 or 15. 14 is looking pretty good. In many communities, we're already seeing certain neighborhoods that are increasing in taxable value. My neighborhood's not one of them. So the bottom seems to be in sight. State and federal revenues make up a very significant portion of the county's overall revenue as well. Over the past 5 years, we've experienced pretty significant swings in the amount of money that's available to the county through the state and federal government. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on. In the past years, those federal dollars and state dollars have been very important to many programs that we offer to you. And again, we'll talk a little bit about some of those in a few minutes. But they also benefit our residents through quality of life projects. They benefit our residents through funding at the health department and services that are offered through the health department. So they've supported many, many programs that the county is involved with. Our expenditure numbers should look fairly similar to our revenue numbers because, after all, one of the things that our board does is they ensure that they adopt and finish the year with balanced budgets. In 2008, our expenditures and our revenues were $62 million. In 2013, they're projected to be $55 million. So you can see there have been very significant cuts in expenditures at the county level. The Board of Commissioners works very hard to ensure that their budgets are balanced. And one of the practices that they have become quite disciplined with has been setting priorities and sticking to them. The board regularly reviews their initiatives to ensure that they're consistent with their priorities. Some of these priorities are county-centric policy or programs and priorities. Some of these are not. They may be community priorities, things that are expressed through programs like Blue Meets Green. But the board supports them actively in many ways. Some of the other practices that the board uses to control costs are putting certain projects on hold. That may mean something like delaying repairs to a parking lot. It could be hanging on to some outdated software just a little bit longer, or keeping a piece of equipment or machine running just one more year so we can squeeze a little bit more out of it. They make sure that they focus their investments on what they feel and you feel are most essential for the community. They also invest in improving the local environment with the hope of stimulating private investment. And one of the things that they've been doing that's relatively new in the last couple of years is paying down debt as well as long-term liabilities. So where have expenditures been increasing over the past 5 years? Primarily in just 3 areas. Legislative is one of them. But before you get excited and say we've given the Board of Commissioners all raises, the fact is that there's a lot of things that are paid for out of their budget. And one of the things that they've been doing quite a bit of the last 3 years has been putting a lot of money into some of our paying off and paying down a lot of our long-term liabilities. In one of our recent years, they put $2.9 million of extra funding into our retirement health care system, just so we could begin addressing that long-term liability. A second area where we're seeing some increase in expenditures is in public safety. Crime is up, certain types of crimes are up. And I don't think there's anyone here that feels we should be cutting back drastically in the courts or in the sheriff's and corrections divisions. Those are important to our quality of life, and protecting our family and our property is very important to all of us. The other area that the board has been spending a little bit more money in has been community and economic development. Not a lot of money. In 2008, the board really wasn't spending anything on community and economic development. It's been as high in the last 5 years as $900,000 a year. The board's doing what they can, what their budget allows them to do, to try and attract and retain businesses and jobs in the community. Over the years, they've invested in utility systems, provided low-interest loans to communities for public improvements, for job training, workforce development. Several years ago, the board established a revolving loan fund, and that revolving loan fund was used to assist businesses that we're trying to attract, businesses we're trying to retain, and to assist local communities in ensuring that they can set a table that's appealing to a developer who may want to come here and make an investment. One of the things they make sure they do, however, is in funding that revolving loan fund, they have to make sure that they don't dip into other essential areas of their budget. Many units of government in the region, in Michigan, throughout the state of Michigan, have been dipping into the rainy day funds to keep their budgets balanced. Your county's fund balance has grown in the last 5 years. In 2008, it was equal to 13.7% of the general fund. Today, the fund balance is equal to 17% of the general fund. In terms of actual cash, it's not a big number. It's about $1 million over the last 5 years. However, what you've got to keep in mind is that over the last 5 years, we've been experiencing revenue reductions of about $1.4 million every single year. Yet at the same time, the board has been very aggressive in reducing their expenditures, and as a result, the fund balance has remained stable and has actually grown. I mentioned just a few moments ago about long-term liabilities. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about these three areas when it comes to liabilities. Let's talk about pensions first. The county pension program covers county employees, road commission employees, and community mental health employees. In 2007, our pension program was 97% funded. That was huge. But we all know what happened in 2008. All of you took a hit, I'm sure, in your 401ks. The county took a hit as well. In 2011, when our actuarial report was completed, we found that we were 83% funded, and we had liabilities of $216 million. Our actuarial report for 2012 won't be completed till the end of this year, so I can't tell you how we did last year. Now, being 83% funded seems rather low, but when you look at the average and what is considered the standard for public sector pensions, the average is 74% funded. If you're greater than 80% funded, you're assumed to be very, very strong, very healthy. So at 83%, we're feeling fairly comfortable. However, we are being very careful in how we use that fund, and we are ensuring that our partners, Community Mental Health and the Road Commission, are keeping that program funded as well. We have experienced some significant growth as the stock market has increased. The pension fund has done well also. In fact, last month we hit and broke the $200 million level for our assets in the pension program. The pension board was very happy to see that occur. We've also been moving away from defined benefit programs to defined contribution programs. Retirement health care remains a huge liability for the county. In 2011, it was identified that we only had 6 to 8 years left in a pre-funded program. Most public sector programs do not pre-fund their retirement health care. The county chose many years ago to pre-fund it. We discovered in 2011 we've got some issues. Chairperson Bohm, along with partners with the employee groups, the Retirement Association, the Road Commission, the Community Mental Health, got together and decided we've got to address this problem. They began making changes in 11 and 12 to retirement health care drug coverage as well as medical coverage. And as a result of what they've done, they believe that they have cut retirement health care costs by 1/3. That's very significant for us. We'll see when the actuarial report is completed at the end of this year if we've hit our goals. Yet another strategy that the board's been using to try and address long-term liability is reducing our costs for our debts, our capital debts. The county does not have a lot of capital debt. There are just a few bonds that are out there right now. Over the last couple of years, they've refinanced the debt on the intervention center, moving from 4.5% to 3.3%. That resulted in a savings of about $80,000 a year to the general fund. The county building, currently we are engaged in discussions to refinance the county administration building from 4% down to 2.2%. And we expect that's going to save us about $50,000 a year. Our bond rating remains consistent and remains strong. The last time we had a very thorough review of our bond rating was when we issued bonds for the convention center. At that time, we were rated as AA stable. Since then, through the refunding of some of our bonds, we have had that bond rating confirmed. Every year we try and talk to you a little bit about measures. How have we done over the last couple of years? I'm going to share with you a little bit about the county's measures, but also talk about the Blue Meets Green measures that have been developed and used. If you remember the Blue Meets Green program that Chairperson Bohm spoke a little bit, and many of you have been involved with over the last 3 or 4 years, that brought together a great deal of private sector individuals to sit down and talk about where we need to go to redefine our local economy. We had multiple meetings throughout the county. It resulted in about 58 different tasks, an awful lot to accomplish over the last couple of years. I can tell you that 28 of those tasks have been completed, 12 are ongoing, 27 are also in process, and only 3 of those 58 projects were actually canceled, primarily because the country has changed, our environment here locally has changed, and as a result, those particular projects were no longer relevant. Overall, that's a pretty good track record. We're going to look at 2 report cards for you right now. Over the next couple of years, the planning department, along with Blue Meets Green, will be looking at trying to consolidate these 2 measures. So it will be a little confusing what we look at right now, but I think when we come back to you next year and in subsequent years, you'll see how they work, how they come together. So, what I'd like you to do is pull out the report card you see in front of you. Let's take a look at a little bit of this. One thing I'd like you to keep in mind as you go through this is that creating data, finding data, tracking down data to measure the kind of characteristics we'd all like to know a little bit about isn't always easy. It's very, very difficult. And as a result, some of what I'm going to share with you today, the data is really inconclusive. And obviously we'll have to do some additional research. In some of the instances, with some of this data, you're going to see that the characteristics being measured between the county and Blue Meets Green are similar. In some cases, you're going to see where it's a little bit different. So let's look at people. Poverty, unfortunately, is up in the county. College retention for full-time students is up. That's great as well. A couple of trends that are a little bit interesting. I had the luxury of having 2012 report card and 13 in front of me so I could look at these actual numbers. You don't have that with you unless somebody brought their 2012 in their pocket, which I doubt. But some of the trends that are a little bit interesting and kind of strange, so you probably should look at it closer, is MEP scores are down in some areas, but yet ACT scores are up. So does that mean we're doing better training and educating our older K through 12 and not quite as good with the 7th and 8th graders? I don't know. Maybe there's something going on with the data. Maybe there's something going on with the tests that we don't know. Associates and bachelor's degrees are down, but yet at the same time in the county, bachelor's degrees are up. Master's and doctorate degrees are up. Could this mean that we're attracting higher educated individuals to the community, which would mean we've got higher skilled jobs, professional level jobs? We really don't know just based on the measures that you see in front of you. This is a report that Blue Meets Green just released last month, and it looks at what they measured for people. What you'll see here is a comparison to state averages instead of the region that we feel we compete with. Graduation rates are significantly higher than the state average, but the trend down, which is unfortunate, is patterned after the state trend as well. Unemployment rates are down, approximately 2 percentage points for county and the state, but we remain higher than the statewide average in unemployment. What's interesting to me in looking at some of this information historically is that when unemployment began to drop within the region, St. Clair County seemed to be somewhat insulated, and it took a couple of years for our unemployment rates to begin mirroring what was going on in the rest of the region. And I think what we're probably going to see my guess, of course, is that as the region recovers, we're probably going to be somewhat insulated from that recovery as well. Our numbers will lag, so as the Southeast Michigan area sees improvements, it will be a couple of years before we begin to realize that impact as well. Place measures. The county report shows that our workers are traveling a little bit further than they did before, and they're doing so alone. That could mean that they're being a little bit more flexible, a little bit mobile. Maybe they've changed jobs over the last couple of years. Home values are up by nearly $16,000. That's good for a lot of us. There is really no significant change in crimes against persons, but you will see that crimes against property are down as well. I believe that's what you'll see there. Let's take a look at Blue Meets Green Place. This is some very interesting information and some issues that the EDA has been struggling with for the last couple of years. Industrial building vacancies are increasing. Yet, at the same time, we're seeing large increases in commercial and industrial building investments and renovation. It could mean a couple of things. It could mean that the number of obsolete structures, which the EDA tells me we have quite a few vacant yet obsolete structures. In other words, they no longer are capable of supporting current manufacturing operations. That the number of obsolete buildings continues to go up. Yet at the same time, we're seeing greater investment in industrial buildings. That would lead me to believe that there are some vacant buildings out there that are being left behind. Those involved in developing the place indicators are struggling, and how do you quantify improvements in place? I think that's something you will see change over the next couple of years, and as we report to you, you'll see some differences in the data that's presented. Prosperity can mean many things to many people. In this case, we're going to look at individual and household wealth. Is it improving or is it not? Job creation really changed significantly from the previous year. It doubled. Not huge numbers, but for a community our size, pretty significant. Personal income is up slightly, and household income is up slightly. The percentage of our workforce population that is between the ages of 25 and 34 is down. The loss of our young people to other areas has plagued St. Clair County for many years, as well as the state of Michigan. There are small geographic areas in the state of Michigan that are bucking this trend and are seeing improvements in those younger people moving back. Unfortunately, we haven't found the right formula to make that happen yet. However, there is a lot going on in the community. There are organizations like the Young Professionals, the Community Foundation, efforts from the EDA, efforts of the community college to try and bring those young people back to the community. Blue Meets Green also measures prosperity. They've got some solid some solid numbers here, if you take a moment and look at those. Over the past couple of years, I've used the State of the County address to highlight certain offices and operations. This year, I want to focus on several that we feel offer businesses and private sector investors some useful services. Offices that provide you with resources that you may not be aware of that could well create an opportunity for you. Most people don't think of the library as a place that can create opportunity for business. But if you do, you probably haven't taken a look at their website lately. The library really provides a sense of place in the community. We've got 11 libraries located throughout our county. Beautiful places. They provide broadband access to thousands of people every day who otherwise wouldn't have access to the internet. If you visited their website, you know they have ebooks, they have books and magazines and newspapers online that you can read. At the library, you can attend computer classes, tutoring classes for your kids, and you have free access to many, many different research tools. At every library, there is broadband wireless available. They have a law library for you to use, and they have special collections devoted to Michigan and regional history. In addition to offering programs and services to families and adults, they provide a lot of resources to small businesses. Lately, there's been quite a bit of talk about workforce development and the need of improving workplace skills programs, worker testing, and in general, preparing our students and our workers for the workplace. The library website offers many of these programs to your workers and to you as an employer at no cost. And if you haven't visited the skill building for adults portion of the website, I urge you to do so as soon as you can. Here's an example of some of the testing programs that they offer, online testing programs. And if you can't see this, well, I did it on purpose, so maybe after the meeting, you'll actually go take a look at the website. But if you're interested in testing a potential employee in a certain area, or if you've got a child that's interested in a certain program area, and you want to give them a taste of what it might be like, this is a great place to do some prep testing. Prep testing for the ACT test, the military entrance exam. This is a great resource for all of us to take advantage of. The Job and Creator and Career Accelerator site was designed to benefit members of the workforce in assessing their interests, to help find internships, to prepare resumes, cover letters, and even find employment. The A to Z database, up in the left corner, is a referencing and marketing database that includes 30 million business profiles and information on 220 million residents. It's ideal for sales leads, mailing lists, market research, employment opportunities, and much more. And if you run a small business, you'll find value in this free tool at the county website. The Blue Ways of St. Clair County. This is a project we talked a little bit about in the past. There's a couple of new things going on with this program, however. You'll notice a lot of kayakers in these pictures. One of the things you need to know about kayakers is they're generally empty nesters. They generally have a high level of disposable income, and they like to spend that money. And they like to spend that money in places where they can recreate. And we all know there are plenty of opportunities for kayak and canoe recreation in St. Clair County. This year, the planning department is beginning a pilot program to try and connect those users of these recreational opportunities with businesses. Find out what it is that the users want to know about a community, where they spend their money, how they interact with businesses. And they're also going to be talking to businesses about what you do to cater to the needs of these types of visitors. Next year, their hope is that they will be able to receive funding to expand this program throughout the entire fund. So through the assistance of the planning department, MSU Extension, and our communities to the north, we'll take a look at the entire region and try and identify ways in which you, in the business community, can actually connect with the users of those systems. Most of you probably don't know, I'll just cover this real quick, we do have a Pro-Am canoe race here in St. Clair County. It occurs every year, in, I believe, June 1st. June 1st of this year is our race. I looked at Vicky because I'm pretty sure I got this off the website. There is various classes of racers, and there is a purse. So it's a very interesting event to watch if you've never seen one before. I'm just going to skim quickly through emergency management. There's a couple of different projects that emergency management is involved with that can benefit your business. As you know, if you've got an incident at your facility, you want those first responders to be able to get in there, respond, protect life, protect property as quickly as possible. That means that you've got to be willing to work with the local fire department and other emergency managers so they understand what they're going to see when they get there. They understand the systems that are at place within your organization. One of the tools that they have to help them with planning and response is something called resilience. If you've never seen this program, take a look at their website, find out a little bit more about it. There is a video on there that explains what the program is all about. It is a great project that can help all of you in the event that you've got an incident at your facility. Convention Center. Everybody wants to know what's going on with the Convention Center, and some days, believe me, I want to know what's going on with it as well. Actually, we meet every week. We meet every Thursday, and we talk about where we're at with all the project partners. We usually have very, very productive meetings. Every once in a while, they're contentious meetings, but most of the time, they're very productive. I just got off the phone before the meeting today to talk with the individual that is owning and managing the restaurant. We talked about some of the details and catering the facility, and he informed me that in the next month, you will see announcements in the paper. The hotel and the restaurant will be hiring several hundred people to prepare for a summer opening. Soon, you'll see announcements for bids on renovations to the hotel, the restaurant, the lobby and common areas, the ballroom, which the county owns, site work, meaning utilities, parking lots, and for landscaping. Keep in mind that those projects that are funded and owned by the private sector will be bid and awarded by the private sector. The county has no control over those. Those projects that are associated with the county that we own, they will be bid and contracts awarded the same way we do all of our projects. Federal and state reforms. How much time do I have? 2 minutes. Okay. This is an area you want to make sure I did cover a little bit to make way for our legislators. In a nutshell, some of the legislation that we've seen come through at the state and federal level has been great for the county. And in some cases, the changes haven't been so great. Let me give you a couple of examples. State and federal revenues every year vary every year depending on who's running the administration, the state and federal level. Depends on legislation that's just been enacted. And it depends on internal policies within those departments that control those funds. We've experienced over the last few years swings as much as $4 to $7 million a year in funding that's available to the county. Those federal and state policies that control how those funds are used and awarded have been very dynamic over the last few years. And I'm sure as you, in running your own business, would agree that consistency and predictability in your business is very important. With those wild swings in the amount of funding that's available to support programs, whether they're in the criminal justice area or they're in the health department, it makes it very difficult to put together a county budget and to move some of those programs forward. The last few years, having a state budget adopted on time has been great for the county. It is really nice to be able to have a state budget in place in May or June while the county is preparing its budget. In years past, we've experienced times when the state legislator haven't adopted a budget until October or November, and the Board of Commissioners must have their budget in place by the end of December. So the last few years have been great when it comes to adopting state budgets. Some examples of some of the state legislation that's been beneficial and has impacted the county has been legislation aimed at managing public employer health care costs, encouraging the consolidation of services through grants that assist us in putting together innovative programs that can be transferred to other units of government in the state. Tying revenue sharing to performance measures, requiring us to ensure that we're constantly improving the level of service and how we deliver services to ensure that we can receive revenue sharing has been a great improvement for us. Right to work legislation, we really don't know what the impact of that is going to be yet. We'll just have to wait and see. Tax reform, whether it's the personal property tax reform or transportation and road tax reform, will have an impact on the county. And certainly some of the review and new initiatives and how the state deals with economic development affects the county, affects local units of government, businesses that are trying to invest, and it certainly affects the operations of the EDA. The county's been affected by federal legislation as well. Probably the greatest impact on service delivery within the county so far has been with healthcare reform. In some departments of the county, program compliance is really driving staffing levels, trying to ensure that we've got adequate staff, yet trying and reduce the potential of penalties through the Patient Protection and Affordability Act. That's a mouthful. A patent, we call it. It's been very difficult and very time-consuming. Some of our departments have found it relatively easy, the smaller departments. Some of the more complex departments are still trying to work out the details. The uncertainty in the rules creates significant confusion, both for the bargaining units that we deal with and for management as well. And the county's compliance strategy for affordable care has changed dramatically over the last 8 months as new rules are released by the federal government. And unfortunately, we don't really know the full impacts of the Affordable Care Act at the present time because the act will be implemented over the next couple of years. And as I said, the rules, the administrative rules, continue to change as well, and that affects our strategy. Another federal issue that the county has been struggling with the last couple of years has to do with the bioreactor system out at the landfill. The technology has the potential of increasing the lifespan and the capacity of the landfill many times over, while at the same time producing significant energy and electricity for our community. Unfortunately, federal policy and administrative procedures that are used to manage this technology still considers the project a research and development initiative. And without changes to some of the EPA administrative rules, we're not going to be able to expand the current bioreactor into those landfill cells that we need to continue building. On the positive side, several of the programs that I've talked to you about and that I've shown you some examples of were funded largely through federal dollars. So they take away here, but they give here. So we do all that we can to ensure that we take advantage of the opportunities that are available to us and presented to us. Perhaps one of the greatest challenges that we face as an organization and as a community is the wise use of the opportunities that all of us have been blessed with. Sometimes we don't always recognize those opportunities. It could be the natural beauty that we sometimes take for granted, the pure air and water, the many visitors that are willing to invest in the community to create jobs, the educational opportunities that are available to us, or the key leaders in the community that truly are committed to giving back to the community. If there is one thing that the last few years have shown us, it's that we can't afford to squander these opportunities. And a great way to ensure that this doesn't happen is to work together, to ensure that decisions are well thought out, are validated, are tested. Efforts like the Blue Meets Green are great examples of how we can effectively work together to the benefit of everyone. The strong relationships that we have with our legislators offers both opportunity as well as guidance. Get to know your legislators. Let them hear what's important to you and what you believe can be done to help our community. More times than not, what we really should be asking of them is not a handout. Instead, we should ask for a hand in clearing the way so that we can do what we feel is best for our community. I look forward to the coming year. We've got a lot of challenges as we deal with landfill issues, road funding issues, the convention center. But I'm sure that in working together, as we have over the last few years, we can make some pretty fantastic things happen. So I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to attend today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kauffman. That was very interesting. Now I'd like to introduce our next group of folks. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Lori Doughty. Lori is the AT&T Regional Director of External Affairs and is going to moderate our legislative panel here today. AT&T is the premier sponsor of today's event. It is fitting that Lori help us with this conversation about state policy and our economy because AT&T recently made two very big announcements that directly impact those two things. Earlier this month, AT&T announced that it has invested more than $1.5 billion in our state's wireline and wireless infrastructure over the last 3 years. More than $650 million of that was in the southeastern Michigan region. Then AT&T partnered with GM in a move to bring 4G wireless into cars. What an exciting announcement for these two companies to partner for this endeavor. Wireless technology is in our homes, in our cars, and in our pockets is what our economy is moving towards. These recent announcements from the AT&T support that and support our Michigan economy. Lori, thank you very much for being with us today. And now I'd like to ask Lori and our panel of representatives to move to the stage for the panel.
Everyone. We're very lucky to have our legislators that represent St. Clair County here with us today. And I know they've been introduced, but I thought I'd introduce them again and give them just a brief moment for an introductory statement. So here to my right, we have State Senator Phil Pavlov.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. What a great opportunity to get in front of all the community leaders and hear what the progress of St. Clair County is. As a former county commissioner, I'm proud of where the county is going. And to comment and to echo Commissioner Bohm's comments earlier, is that relationships dictate results. And as I go around to each and every one of these tables, whether I'm talking to the healthcare professionals or the people on the road commission or our education people that are in the community, there's an infinite demand of resources that every group is struggling with today. And the uncertainty not only at the federal level is impacting pretty much everybody at every table in some form or another as we go through sequestration, the fiscal cliff, and new expansions into healthcare. That certainly falls on the state legislature as well, and I don't want to use the excuse that all things run downhill, but certainly what we do at the state level has an impact on not only St. Clair County, but all of the members that are represented in this room today, and I'm just happy to be in front of the group today to hopefully answer some questions.
Okay, next we have newly elected State Representative Dan Lauwers.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to everyone, and it's great to be here and to be the newly elected member. I have everything to learn, and that's why I'm glad to be here. I was thinking earlier today, last year I came to this meeting for the first time and sat unnoticed in the back for the most part, which was enjoyable. I remember during the panel presentation, the legislators were asked what advice you would give to someone considering public office, and Judge Gilbert said, "Don't do it." And that's when I swallowed hard and thought, okay, what am I getting myself into? But it's been a great experience so far. As you know, I run the grain elevator in Emmett, from a farming background, and still manage to make it into the grain elevator every day before I get to Lansing. And I think that helps keep my feet on the ground and keep me accessible. We have a particularly unique community here in county, not just because of our resources, but because of the atmosphere you can feel in this room and you see that leadership. And so I'm very grateful to be part of that.
Thank you. To my left, we have State Representative Muxlow.
Thank you for inviting me today, and it's kind of exciting to see a big crowd each year here. I like the enthusiasm there is with the leaders of St. Clair County to kind of improve the welfare of everyone, and particularly economic development and the encouragement we have in those areas. I spent a number of years serving on an economic development board, and we make various efforts. We've tried to change the playing field in Lansing and make it more conducive for business and industry to come to this area. So I'm encouraged with the enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you. And then last but not least, State Representative Andrea LaFontaine.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for allowing me to be here with you today. I'm excited to be back. Something kind of exciting and interesting about being here is what is new from my last term is in this term, I've gained more area in St. Clair County. So I've lost some of Macomb County, but I've gained more of St. Clair County, which I've been ecstatic about. And then something new that I hope you all it'll be new to you to learn, and something that you can take advantage of, is I was recently appointed to be chairwoman of the Natural Resources Committee, which is extremely relevant to this area, and I really hope to capitalize with this opportunity. And it was kind of interesting because a lot of the guys from Northern Michigan and the UP were like, "Really, you're chairing the Natural Resources Committee? You're from Southeast Michigan. What do you even know about that?" But little do they know, we have a lot to offer in that department. And just to kind of give you, I'm still running my office as I had before, actively listening and learning from my constituents and hoping to do my best to represent you all. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with a couple broad questions, and we hope that all of the legislators can weigh in on each of these questions, and then we'll get to a specific policy question related to each legislator. And then for you all, we will open up the floor, and you'll be able to ask a question if you so choose, which is a great opportunity for you. So our first question for all the legislators: in January, MDOT and federal agencies confirmed that the plan to bring the Blue Water Customs Plaza down to ground level was no longer a priority, and the funding of the project was not included in the 5-year plan. Thus, a 16-acre development is essentially canceled. The original 56-acre plan resulted in numerous residential and commercial properties being purchased by MDOT. Now there are many unused properties that should be released back to the city of Port Huron for redevelopment. Please explain how you can assist our local governments, both city and county, by encouraging the release of these excess properties back to the community, master plan development, and for regrowth of the tax base. Who wants to go first?
I'll take a stab at that. And this effort on the Blue Water Plaza expansion has been a community conversation for well over a decade. And again, it goes back to the time that I was on the county board. This isn't a conversation that has just kind of landed on us. And I think as I look out and I see all the community leaders, whether you were a township, county official, whether it was a public safety issue, EMS, police, fire, all those issues kind of collate around. This community got very engaged. The city city of Port Huron obviously had a massive impact. And, we worked with MDOT. One of the things that I always kept in the back of my mind is that this plaza expansion, we can never rule out the no-build option. And unfortunately, with all of that planning and all of the sacrifices that have been made, not only to the budget of the city of Port Huron, but MDOT planning and all of the resources that have been applied to this, we were essentially told that the no-build option is going to be the preferred option. What does that mean going forward? Hundreds of properties that have been taken out of the tax base, hundreds of water and sewer taps that no longer come in to support the stranded infrastructure of that area. We really need to leverage our federal legislators and our congressional delegation, and certainly Candace Miller has been a lead in our voice in Washington to hold the department, whether it's the Department of Transportation, Homeland Security, accountable for the decisions that have been made. And to a greater extent, the businesses in the community that have been affected by this, that have been on a holding pattern, buildings have been torn down, expenditures have been made to find new locations for some of our businesses. All at the same time, we've had a negative impact as well. We stay engaged in this conversation. We've been a part of it for well over a decade, and there's a lot of work that needs to happen. The idea of turning that property back over anytime soon, I don't have a lot of confidence in that.
And I know this is a particularly frustrating issue for us. When we hear discussions in the state about a new span in Detroit and the dire need for that, and we're sitting up here going, okay, we've already got a span and it's underutilized, and when are we going to complete what we have? It's a tricky question for a state legislature, because so much of what is the roadblock here has to do with the federal government, and we only get to vote once. But as Phil said, we're really willing to extend as much pressure as we can. We'll need your support to do it as well. Don Brown's here, and Candace's office was at the meeting in January. That was that really lovely day back in January when you couldn't see out the windows from the snow flying. But we are working together. Candace is on the Homeland Security Committee, so she's in a good position to help us apply some of that. What we were told at that meeting is that the funding was really yanked and put to the southern borders that we were going to have for the Plaza project. And so we all need to work together, and I know everyone up here is committed to doing that, to work with Candace's office, work with our senator's office as well, and see what we can do to pry some of that funding loose and get it back up here, and at least get enough closure to the project that we can operate it effectively. Long term, it's going to take a lot of work to get completion and complete development there.
This concern was brought to me some time ago, I think, after I was first elected a couple of years ago, so I've been very aware of it and concerned along with you folks. I guess it was revealed to me kind of early. I had my piece of paper walking the streets, knocking on doors, and when I got to one of those streets, there was no one home. All the doors were boarded up. And now that's territory that's unused. So I had the same concerns, and it was kind of revealed to me when I began to look around. In fact, they talked about 80 acres to me the first time that they were talking about the plaza, and then 56, and now 16. So I have the same concern, and I've talked to a number of stakeholders about seeing what we could do. And I don't know how hopeful it is, but I'll still be working.
And for the sake of not being the echo in the room and saying everything they just said, I do agree with everything that they have to say, and I do believe there is a strong, we have power in numbers, and as long as all of us as a delegation can continue to work together along with our federal representative, Candace Miller, I see we could really apply a great amount of pressure in order to take care of this issue, but we're all happy to work together and lobby on your behalf in regards to this issue.
Thank you.
Now, Jeff, there's a Senate seat opening up. Help us out a lot.
Okay, thank you. Our next question. Since taking office, Governor Snyder has been quick to make changes, and this fervor seems to have influenced the legislature into moving public policy changes through so quickly that stakeholders don't have enough time to examine the bills and provide input. This has caused a concern that an essential part of our diplomatic process is being compromised. How do you respond to constituents and stakeholders who want and deserve time to vet these policies and don't feel like they are getting enough time to adequately do that.
I can start. We'll go this way this time. In regards to the fast pace, I guess it's kind of interesting because the group of legislators that I came in with, we don't know any different besides the pace at what we're operating. And we've had to learn rather quickly, but to say that things are moving so quickly where it doesn't give us an opportunity to really read the bills, I think is a false statement because I read everything that comes across my desk. And granted, I had been trained that way because I was completing my master's while I was serving the legislature, so it was ingrained in me to study and know and understand before I act on something. However, to say that it's fast-paced, and I would disagree because we don't know any different. And I think we are being effective, and I think we're being efficient, and we're doing the job that we were sent to Lansing to do.
Yeah, I agree with Andrea. We've done a lot of things in the last couple of years. I'm not sure that everybody really realizes all the things that have happened. It's moving quickly versus moving slowly or not at all. And so we happened to hire a governor that said, let's get things done. So sometimes I see things a little bit too quickly coming across my desk, but the result looked pretty good to me.
I think the question centers on, did the public or constituents or stakeholders really have adequate time to weigh in before they were votes? Not so much did you get an opportunity to digest what it is you were voting on.
I'll defer most of this because I'm a newly elected legislator and didn't participate in the process last year, but I can tell you as a new person who just basically walked into Lansing off the street, we spend, I would say, and of course, you're talking to guys who've only been here 2 months now. We spend 90% of our time meeting with our constituents. That's really the bulk of the job, and that happens in our office. It happens in the district. It happens at the committee level. And if I hear a complaint, it's more often that, man, you guys just move so slowly, you don't get nothing done. So it's a perplexing question. I think there's a lot of research and a lot of thought and a lot of trial balloons that go into everything that's done in the legislature. And so when it actually seems to maybe break loose and happen, it might seem that it's happening quickly if you haven't been engaged in that dialogue from the beginning. But I can tell you right now from just being there a short while, I'm amazed to see how many things are brought before us. And it's a person from St. Clair County or certainly in the state saying, now, we've been working on this since 1997, and they start going through the history. So I guess I've heard more criticism about moving too slow than moving too fast. But I would sincerely encourage anyone that thinks that they're not getting adequate time to bring their issues before the legislature and have input. We're very accessible. We have a small 2-person staff. If there's the third line lights up and I'm in the office, I pick up the phone. So at least from my perspective, please know that we want to hear from you.
I think Dan's right. One of our biggest challenges is to be able to get back and communicate back to our constituents. And of course, this is a great forum to be able to hold that conversation. But I want to put the context, I don't want to turn it into a political conversation, but the reality is these are all Republican legislators that are sitting here. We have a Republican governor, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Republican-controlled House. We also have a rule of law Supreme Court. We have an Attorney General, Secretary of State that is also Republican. I have been on both sides. I've served 4 years as a minority member in the State House when we had Governor Granholm, a Democrat, and a Democrat-controlled State House. I think what happens is sometimes we get pulled into a political conversation, and of course, the majority is a very powerful force in all of politics, whether it's on a school board, majority does rule. And so I think the conversation is really centered on what happened in Lane Dunn last year as we had the statewide conversation with the right to work discussion. And I have said to the constituents that have called my office both for and against the proposal And this has been a conversation that's taken place in Michigan for decades. And due to political alignment and timing, and the fact that the voters had an opportunity to weigh in at least on a portion of what the labor environment in Michigan is going to look like going forward, it became a timing issue. And one of the things that is so important about a democracy and open government is that we do it transparently. Whether we're talking about road funding, and we talked about that a little earlier, the very same conversation and demand and need for road dollars that I'm hearing today is the very same conversation that I heard in 2005 when I walked into the Transportation Committee. A lot of these issues have been around a very long time, and it becomes an issue of when can you get it done, and typically that conversation is driven by process, and of course we want to make sure that we maintain the process and be as open and transparent as possible.
Just to speak to accessibility of the legislators, I get the opportunity to work with them quite a bit in my job, and I have to say, whenever I do need to speak with one of them, they are very accessible and open, so I encourage you to meet with them if you do have questions or concerns. Now we're going to go into the specific questions for each legislator, and we're going to start with Senator Pavlov. And Bill Kauffman touched on this on some of the library resources when he was talking earlier about workforce education. Multiple reforms have taken place to encourage business growth and job creation, as well as the quality of education. Companies that have job opportunities that are available are speaking to the need for training and education programs that will improve the quality of the local workforce, as the majority of the workforce is either underskilled or undereducated. With the cost of college tuition growing an average of 8% per year, and more companies requiring 2 to 4-year degrees for entry-level jobs, do you see opportunities for funding workforce development programs?
Well, there is, and it isn't just a function of funding, it's a function of the policy that aligns all the curriculums up. To give you an example, just in the last week, I met with President Baker College. We had a House and Senate committee under the direction of Representative Muxlow come and hold a committee hearing at SC4 on Monday. I was able to attend the Oregon Area School District budget workshop on Tuesday evening. We are in constant contact to try to align up the policy. Let me give you a couple of examples of things that we've done in the legislature over the last couple of years to help on that workforce issue. We have greatly expanded dual enrollment for our high school students so that while they're working on their high school diploma, there's a great opportunity to pull down college credits, whether it be through an associate's program at SC4 or a career certificate program at Baker. Very important for a number of reasons. It speeds up the time to degree for these students. It gives them a chance to be able to knock down the costs, the skyrocketing costs of higher education, so that they're earning those credits in a high school environment. Those are very important. I think the online learning that we've expanded is going to play a critical role in not only credit recovery for high school students that might have a little bit of help, but also align them up with potentially a foreign language component that can help them along the way. And lining up some of the vocational programs to meet up with the Michigan Merit Curriculum is a conversation that's going on today. But I would engage the business community that's here today for you to let us know what kind of skills do you believe that are quantifiable. I mean, anecdotal data doesn't help when we're having the biggest policy conversations. What would be very helpful for us is to know exactly what kind of programs aren't being directed to your employees and where that actual gap exists. Because as Bill Kauffman said, maybe our MIEP scores are dropping a little bit, but our ACT scores are going up. The indication there is that the rigor of our curriculum is working in Michigan. Our graduation rates are up statewide, and we're getting higher ACT scores. That means that the rigor of Algebra 2 and foreign language appears to be working. So when we make very big policy decisions on what we're going to teach our kids in our schools, I think that's a statewide and a community conversation that has to take place. But the idea is we need to be educating the skills to get these kids paid and to get them to buy those houses that are appreciated in our community and to have their families here and put our kids, put their children in our schools and come back to that growth again.
next question is for Representative Dan Lauwers. St. Clair County is one of the leading counties in Michigan for the number of bridges that conveniently tie our residents and business community together. As a border community, assets such as I-94, I-69, and Ontario's 402 greatly impact the local, state, and national economy. How can we reform our road funding so that it doesn't negatively impact our already heavily tax-burdened citizens? And then, how will you work to ensure that St. Clair County receives appropriate funding to maintain that critical infrastructure?
That's a really good question. And as a member of the Transportation Committee, and it's a committee I requested, against some counsel, some people said, you know, you're a brand new guy, don't get on transportation. There's some really tough issues going to happen there. But I asked for transportation because of the reasons that Lori just read in that question. We are a border community, and you know, throughout the history of mankind, international border crossings are the source of wealth. You know, and we have potential to be that. Now, our challenges on infrastructure and roads in particular, St. Clair County has the second most number of bridges of any county in the state. You know, I knew we had a lot of water to get around here, but I didn't know we were that high in it. Like 117 or something like that, I think the number is. And 40-some% of them are in trouble right now. So when we talk about our state and international trunk lines, the big roads, we're not really talking about a lot of those bridges. Our challenge is beyond the obvious challenge of how do we come up with the additional dollars that we need in infrastructure. Go beyond that to how do we come up with a system that allows us to access more of those dollars on the county and local level. You know, I've often said when the governor says, and the governor's right to take this on, right? This is an issue that's been ignored by previous administrations, kind of kicked down the road. We all knew it needs to be addressed, and now this governor is at least brave enough to throw the grenade on the table, you might say, and say, okay, let's pay for it through higher taxes on gas and higher registration fees, right? We may not want to do it that way, but at least we're getting the issue out there on the table. My challenge, as I start to dig into this issue, is to say that I don't know that my repairs would go down on my automobile if I lived on a state trunk line. You know, when I drive 15 miles an hour every day for that first mile and a quarter or mile and a half to get out onto a paved road, you know, I look at that and say, that's where the real problem is, right? We've got a bigger problem with our county roads and our local roads than we do with our state trunk line roads. I'd feel pretty good if I lived on one of those. So the challenges are multitude, and I don't have answers, and I invite you to help share your ideas and any answers you have with me. We don't want to see our taxes go up because we don't want to slow this economy down 1 ounce in the state. At the same time, I haven't got a single department to come forward yet and volunteer to cut their budget on the state level so that we could use more of that money over in roads. So we have a real challenge before us. You know, how do we get more funding without raising taxes, or how do we talk someone into giving up some funding? That is a real challenge, and so I'm all ears. We are looking at everything, trying to find creative ways to address this issue. Many of you probably know I put a survey out on it, and the thing kind of went viral across the state. Unfortunately, I didn't put the zip code requirement in it, and that was my mistake. I'll learn from that one, because I got a lot of input from Kalamazoo and elsewhere. But some things came out very clearly in that, and the number one thing was we need to fix the roads. That was across the board. Everyone agrees we've got to address our infrastructure, and we're not going to be a leading state in the future. You know, as we look around at our other state competitors in province of competition, if we don't address our infrastructure. Business relies on infrastructure. We know that. So we know it has to be addressed, and the public agrees on that. The public broadly agrees as well that we'd really rather not see that come in the form of higher taxes and higher fees. Okay? But if you press beyond that, and I find this in almost all conversations with people, when you do press beyond that, they will say, if you raise any additional money for roads and infrastructure, please be sure that that money goes for roads and infrastructure. So whatever we do, we've got to make sure that we come up with a plan that makes sure that any money that's raised for this is allocated directly to roads and infrastructure. If there's a way that we can find a plan that allows the money to possibly, as Bill has said, not get sent in and then beg for it to come back, to have it generated and allocated and stay home rather than go into the void of Lansing and then we have to get it back, that'd be great. And the third priority of mine is how do we address this in a way that we get more of this road available on the county and local level, because we've got a real challenge before us. If we can generate some more money to our county, they can apply for cost sharing and address these bridges that need fixing and address our county and local roads. So please help.
Thank you. Our next question is for Representative LaFontaine. Reports recently released indicate that the lake levels are the lowest in history. Considering the Great Lakes are important to so many facets of Michigan's economy, including shipping, sports, recreation, tourism, and wildlife, what short-term and long-term effects will this have on Michigan's economy? Also, please explain your recently introduced legislation regarding dredging laws.
Okay, well, I like this one because it's pertinent to the committee that I'm serving on. We realize that low lake levels is an issue that all of Michigan is facing, and it's simple science that evaporation and precipitation is what is controlling these water levels. And if I could raise the levels overnight, trust me, I would. But we had to start looking at solutions because we're coming into prime season. And I'm sure you all know, most of you might have a boat, go out and go utilize the waterways, that we have a problem and we need to figure out what to do. So we have been working as the House of Representatives to really expedite the process of dredging and how to encourage it. Now we do realize that the governor came out with his program that addressed the 49 harbors of refuge that will receive the emergency dredging. However, none of those projects are in my district conveniently. So we had to think, all right, what are we going to do for these private guys? And this is what my bill really touched on, the private marinas that are out there. You have to be able to get these boats out to the water. These boats have to be able to come in. This is their business. So what do we do? So we started doing research and we looked at programs that have been implemented in the past, particularly the most recent one. I served on the Agriculture Committee. We did a similar program for the apple and cherry farmers, and it was a low-interest loan program. So we're like, would we be able to do this for private marinas? And they said, absolutely. So what this bill does, and Senator Brandenburg, he's a senator in Cole County, and I got together and came up with a bill. His is moving faster than mine was with the Senate. Well, there's few of them, so it's easier to get things through. So they sent it over, and I'm happy to report it will be coming to my committee on Tuesday. But what this bill is it allows the private marinas to apply for a low-interest loan. The negotiated interest rate on the loan was 2.5%. That's how it came out of the Senate. If it will stay like that in my committee, I'm not sure. The maximum amount of the loan is $500,000. The Department of Treasury will be paying the loan origination fees, and it has to be paid back within 5 years. And this was a solution that I found from both marina owners in Ira Township and in Chesterfield and New Baltimore came up and said they would be willing to take advantage of this program if it were implemented. So if all goes well, this will be passed out of committee on Tuesday if my members cooperate.
Thank you. And now for Representative Paul Muxlow. You've stated that your number one priority is reform geared to getting Michigan's hard-working taxpayers back to work. Michigan ranks 41st in the nation for its high level of unemployment, and St. Clair and St. Laurent counties rank high in unemployment for the state. We've seen very limited job growth in the Thumb region for a prolonged period, while other parts of Michigan are announcing significant expansions and new industry growth. How are you working to improve job growth opportunities to our area?
Well, I think as we arrived a couple of years ago and under the governor's leadership, he's a businessman. Some of the early tough votes that we took, Michigan business tax, pension tax, a lot of those things are controversial. There was some shifting in taxation and reduction of regulation, trying to improve the environment. There is something unique, probably about Satellite County particularly, where I'm from. We're kind of isolated from some of the highways. I think the closest expressway to my home is about 18 miles. And so it's a little more of a problem up in the rural area. And but I think it will change the environment in the entire state. Sooner or later, it will work its way out here. So I support everything, and I have in terms of voting that changes the environment and improves it for job creation in our area, and I'll continue to do that.
Thank you. And now we're going to open it up to the floor for questions. We have Vince Hilton from our Public Policy Committee, and he has a microphone. And so we're going to take some questions from the audience.
Thank you. My name is Jim Cohen from the city of Yale. I'd like to thank Mr. Pavlov for his explanation to me on weight restrictions on our state roads. I don't necessarily agree with it, I understand it, but I would like to see the weight restrictions lowered on our state roads. I want to know how each one of the panel members felt about that. And is there a movement towards this? Has there been many constituents contact with it? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jim, and the conversation that we had, the beautiful thing about having a 2-hour commute back and forth to Lansing takes a lot of time on the phone. And Jim and I did have this conversation, and it's really in the context of road funding. Are our roads getting beat up because of the very heavy weight regulations that we have in the state of Michigan? It's the highest that there is in the country, the amount of weight that you can carry. And the conversation has been going back and forth, and there hasn't really been a solid, strong argument to say, if we reduce those weight restrictions on what a truck can haul, will that put more trucks on the road? Will the impact of having more congestion and more traffic miles covered? Well, one of the things that we are also working on the weight restrictions, we're working with Sheriff Donlin so that the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department can take a stronger role by leveraging state assets to be able to crack down on the overloaded trucks that are going around. So it's a kind of a combination of issues, and certainly a conversation that's not going to go away, but we have to continue to have it.
I'll address that one too, and I've received direct communication from Jim about this issue, and it's one I'm pretty familiar with because I'm in the shipping business, both rail and truck. And it's one that comes up whenever we talk about road funding. Michigan is unique with its roads. We often hear from constituents, though, about how Canada's roads are better than ours, and their weight restrictions are very similar to ours. They allow 5 ton less than ours too. If you ever notice the big Canadian trucks with a lot of axles and heavy like ours. Some of the things to consider when we're thinking about this is what percentage of the trucks are actually heavy trucks, the 11 axle trucks in Michigan, and it's quite low. It's below 10%. Is this? I think the number is actually something like 6 or 7%. Are these 6 or 7% trucks responsible for tearing up our roads? It's a difficult issue, and it's almost easier to show if I had a couple of toy models up here maybe, but your typical truck has 5 axles, okay? The rest of the country allows 80,000 pounds spread over 5 axles, right? You got your steering axle, 2 drive axles, and 2 more axles on the back of the trailer. So 5 axles, 80,000 pounds. Michigan basically allows twice that load spread on 11 axles, okay? So that's 1 more axle than if you had 2 of those 80,000 pound trucks. So we actually spread our weight out on lower pounds per square inch. And of course, it's anecdotally, maybe looking at it, you look at it and say, wow, that's a lot of weight. But if you actually put it on a scale, we have less weight per pounds per square inch. And dealing with agriculture, we look at pounds per square inch all the time because it causes compaction and breaks things up. One simple way to maybe look at this is if someone gave you a concrete block and said you can choose a 1 pound hammer or a 5 pound hammer to tear that block apart with, which one do you want? The heavy trucks in this state actually have lower pounds on their axles than the 5 axle trucks. So it's a difficult issue. It comes up often. We're going to continue looking at it, continue researching it. But when you start talking to engineers, the engineers are pretty adamant about the fact that the lower the pounds per square inch, the lower the damage, and you're not gonna, if we say go from 160 on 5 axles to 80,000 pounds on 10 axles, you're still gonna take the same amount of weight over the roads with a heavier hammer is basically what they're telling us. So it's a tough issue, Jim, and we'll keep working on it, but the science tends to say that the more axles you can put, the lower you can put that pounds per square inch, the better off you are for your roads.
Last year I had requests from both sides. I do serve on transportation appropriations. This year I was on transportation policy. Last year we have people asking to overload. Some of the farm trucks are requesting a 10% overload in some circumstances, and we have others lobbying against the amount of weight we have per axle now out on our main highways. So the argument's still out there, and I think as we ask for road funding, that'll be part of the discussion.
Likewise, being the echo again. However, I have heard both sides, but in particular, and I'm sure Supervisor Trombley can relate to this, given our area with the Canadian garbage trucks, people are pretty convinced that these trucks are destroying the roads, which is that necessarily the case? I'm not sure, but until I see more research and really hear from both sides, I can't give you my opinion on where I am, because I need more research. I need to see the data, I need to talk to my constituents and see where we're at.
Any other questions from the audience?
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Harris, City Councilman on the City of Fort Warren. As you all know, if you look inside the second and third page of Michigan's 1040, we've had 30 different changes in our tax code. Most of them affect the moderate to low income people in the state of Michigan. How do you plan in the future to correct some of these anomalies?
I can start. I do think something that the governor did try to work on initially when we addressed the tax code, and this is when I still wish we had Representative Gilbert around. No offense to you, Dan, but he was the tax expert, and I'm sure you're the transportation expert, so he didn't want to help get it. But I do think the tax code needs to be simplified and easy to comply with, and I would definitely encourage looking at that and making sure we can streamline or get rid of any redundancies that may be on there or confusion, because it shouldn't be such a complex issue, and that's what it is, and it is confusing, and I don't think it should be like that, but I do think they have made some strides. I mean, I know when I went to my CPA, he said you would make my job complicated every year, and you wouldn't even realize it because it's constantly changing all the time. So I think we need to evaluate which changes are necessary, which ones to implement, and what can we possibly do with it.
Anyone else want to take that one?
You know, I was raised by a father who made us pay our own taxes. I think about 8th grade is when I started filing my own taxes. That's amazing when you can earn $1 an hour on a dairy farm. But my dad was adamant about that. And he said, you know, a man should always be able to calculate his own taxes. He shouldn't have to hire this done. I hire it done today. Because it is far more complicated than you would think it needs to be. And we all know how it gets there. You know, you try to do your best job, and someone has a little change or a twist that they want to make. But I'm a strong advocate of I'd rather do my own taxes than pay someone else to do it. And so we'll continue looking for any opportunity we can to simplify the tax code. Although I will say, my state taxes, I could just about handle them compared to the federal taxes. That's where the real issue is more on a federal level.
Part of the effort that we've been trying to reform on the Michigan tax side is obviously the business owners that have been impacted by the complexity of the Michigan business tax clearly understand, and hopefully they would agree that 6% corporate income tax is much easier to navigate in the state of Michigan. It's ultimately leading to employment and growth in our economy. We still have a little ways to go in terms of the personal income tax, but I think if you take a look at what's happening nationally, you're starting to hear and see very serious conversations about moving to a consumption tax, where some states like Louisiana now are talking about getting rid of their state income tax. getting rid of their property tax, getting rid of business tax, and moving to a complete sales tax where you would have a higher rate. Every piece of the economy where there's a transaction collects that. I think we might be a little ways away from that conversation in a very serious way in Michigan, but we're always driving to make it a little more simplified.
And we've taken action along those lines. Phil's absolutely right. I've asked for the research on that. I serve on the Michigan Competitiveness Committee, which is a new committee that's designed to identify the barriers or the opportunities for our state, to move it ahead of the competition. If you think of our neighboring states and provinces as our competition, and that's one of the things we've looked at. What if we eliminated income tax? That would make it a lot more simple. There's probably only 10 people in Lansing that I've had that conversation with, and mostly, inside Lansing people. I've already got people visiting my office and calling me saying, "Don't do that. Whatever you do, you can't do that. That would be a really bad thing." So it shows you how quickly you propose a change out there. People hear of it and they make their input known.
Well, unfortunately, we're running over. It's been a great discussion. I'm sorry to cut it off, but we'll have to do that. And Rhonda's going to come up with closing remarks, but before she does, let's please give all the legislators a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Lori, and to all of our legislators here today. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch and the conversation. We want to say thanks again to all of the people who came here today, all of the people who have been involved in organizing this, especially the leadership that we have from our panel. Please join us on Friday, May 17th, which is our next quarterly Capital Talk Business Roundtable with Representative Lauwers. And you can find more about this information at bluewaterchamber.com. I also want to thank all of the chamber staff for their hard work in putting this great presentation together. So thanks to Vicki and her staff. On behalf of the Blue Water Area Chamber of Commerce, we would look forward to seeing you all again next year. Drive safe.